Hey everyone, thanks for joining Just Us Chatting. I'm Tamara.
And I'm Michael, and I guess we're going to go through a little bit more of the change the terms FAQs. You can find what we're talking about at changetheterms.org/FAQs. It's an organization of apparently about 40 different civil rights groups that are proposing that we should have basically all of the companies that make up the infrastructure of the internet, and even deeper than that, financial institutions that process payments online should all have, these social justice terms and conditions. So we've been going through them for the past couple of days because we keep getting it's really frustrating to read this stuff. So it's hard to get through it, but I'm going to try and get through some more of it today and try and keep it focused, I guess, a little bit.
Okay.
Let's start with, let's go ahead and kick over to this browser here. Hope everyone can see that. This says, what companies do you want to adopt these policies? Well, let's just go straight to the bullet points there. Social media, video sharing, communications, marketing, event scheduling or ticketing, online advertising, financial transactions or fundraising, public chat or group communications, domain names, building or hosting websites, blogs, or message boards. So, everything.
So they want to police all of these?
They want all of these companies to police themselves according to a social justice ideology, and, as we talked about a little bit before yesterday, these terms that they're asking people to adopt include not just the terms, but built right into the terms is that they're going to import a layer of bureaucracy. They're going to hire social justice ideologues. It's built right into the terms. We're going to hire, civil rights experts. Well, I mean, civil rights experts. That's one way of putting it, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's basically just ideological invasion of a corporation, and they want you to write it right into your terms. So, and that's like you can see there by those bullet points, everything: social media, video sharing, communications, event scheduling, ticketing, marketing, online advertising, financial transactions or fundraising. Right? This is. They want more of what's going on with Patreon to be happening. Right? They want the payment processors to be shutting people down for saying things they don't like. These policies are not intended to be used by internet service providers like Comcast or AT&T. We're committed to an open internet, so they say. Nothing in these policies is intended to allow or support blocking, throttling, or prioritizing any lawful content by an internet service provider. Yeah, they just want to block, throttle, and prioritize lawful comment by everything else, just not the internet service providers. Right, so they're all about the net neutrality as long as you're talking about equal access to the internet, but they don't want people to be able to say anything. If you've got the wrong ideas, then we're totally talking about throttling you. All right, so they want everybody else, the whole rest of the internet. Everyone should have access to our propaganda, our filtered message. Everyone should have access to the internet because we plan on filtering the whole thing, and so that none of the ideas we don't like get propagated on the internet. So that's basically what they mean by that. How will you measure whether a company is complying with these policies? It gets really interesting. We intend to continue to engage directly with tech companies and begin engagement with companies we have not worked with previously. We're happy to sit down with them at any time to discuss the policies and concerns they may have. We'll be actively encouraging tech companies to adopt and implement these policies. After we have given tech companies a reasonable amount of time to digest, adopt, and implement these policies. Like, who
are these
Who
people?
are these people?
Who do they think they are?
Who the hell do they think they are? After we've given them a reasonable amount of time to digest, adopt, and implement these policies.
It's like
Like,
who gave you the right to...
We will initiate an evaluation process to see how companies stack up.
They're gonna have a...
Like yeah, this is basically a political organization that's creating a set of measurements to determine whether or not people are in alignment with their, how close to alignment corporations are with their political agenda.
They're gonna do like a star system, like which companies are the best at policing their
and I'm not necessarily
users.
like against that entirely, sure, whatever, but okay, so the NRA, like they give ratings to politicians, and it's like, oh, this person is, they get an A+ from the NRA, or they get an F from the NRA, or whatever, right? They get graded by the NRA, and it's like, well, if you want to know what the NRA thinks about people, that's great. Yeah. That's fine. The fact that they give an F rating to some politician is probably helpful for people on the progressive side of the stack. They're like, oh, well, that's good. Yeah. Right? But this phrasing, like,
after we have given...
Yeah, we're going to give them a reasonable amount of time to implement these things. Yeah. It's like, well, how very kind and, that's very tolerant of you. Like, it's not your company. Like, what are you talking about?
You have no jurisdiction over these people. Like,
it's disgusting. So their process is going to measure both tech companies' formal policies and how they implement them, right? So they're going to, first of all, they want you to have these formal policies in place, and they're going to monitor how you implement them. Well, how are they going to do that? Without effective, even-handed execution of formal policy is just empty words. That's the first time I've seen a word like even-handed in here. That's really interesting. Even-handed. Well, I'll applaud them for that one word. It's the first word I've liked in this whole thing. Technology changes quickly. Are you worried these policies won't keep up?
Who's even asking these questions?
These model policies are meant to be a living document. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is version 1.0. We fully expect they will need evaluation and revision going forward. We will learn lessons from their implementation, and online behavior will evolve. We hope that the transparency and reporting procedures in these policies will independent researchers in the public. What? There's some missing words there. It probably says something like, will provide independent researchers and the public the data needed to figure out what works and what does not, and then we will revise. So, and here's what works and what does not. Again, what do you mean by works? Like, I think the internet works. It works pretty well.
What works for keeping hate out?
Ah, that's right. So, what works to stop the propagation of ideas that we don't approve of? I think that's really dangerous. I really think that's dangerous, because they've got, it's just, if, here's the thing, this is never surface level stuff. It's like, if it was just like, oh yeah, we're going to get all the racists. It's like, well, that sounds great, but somebody has to define what qualifies as racist. Right. Somebody has to define what qualifies as sexist. Somebody has to define what qualifies as hate.
Right. And technically, unless they're inciting violence, their speech is allowed under the law. You're allowed to say racist things.
Yeah.
Not that I agree with it or like it, but you're allowed to say it, and you're allowed to say sexist things. And it's like, as long as you're not threatening, defaming, you know, like there's certain specifications for what you're allowed to say, you know, but...
And I mean, to a certain extent, I understand what you know, like I appreciate that they're trying to utilize they're trying to pressure the private sector and into doing things voluntarily. They're basically, you know, attempting persuasion here.
Yeah.
Which is better than, you know, trying to pass laws.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I do. I still think it's dangerous, and I think that we actually might have to write some laws about, you know, about whether or not it's, especially in the case of financial institutions. You know, a financial institution that is unwilling to process payments because of a political agenda that is not illegal, right? You know, political organizations that aren't in violation of the law, right? I'm not talking about terrorists.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
you catch someone being a terrorist, then, you know, don't, you know, or if you catch someone funneling money to terrorists, you know, no, shut them down. You know,
Totally.
like totally. But if you're just talking about people who are saying things, and you know, it's like, for example, Sargon of Akkad, like, I don't think that guy was funneling money to terrorists, you know? So, using the financial sector is such a foundational element of our society at this point that to exclude people from it because of their political ideologies when they're not doing anything illegal is absolutely immoral.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah. And it's kind of reprehensible, too.
It's just, it's absolutely reprehensible. And we can't allow that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know,
otherwise we're not
pushing,
America.
you know, that's what they're pushing for.
Yeah.
They're pushing for that. You know, they want people to be silenced. And, you know, again, it doesn't matter whether or not I agree with what people are saying on the internet. It matters that the fundamental principle is, you know,
they're free to express their ideas to a certain extent under the law, you know?
Yeah. We need to have, well, people are free to express their ideas unless those ideas hurt someone.
Right.
Like,
yes,
you know what I mean?
but there's, you know, that harm
right.
word,
Well,
like,
that's the
unless
idea.
they hurt someone in their minds,
right.
what is
they're
hurtful,
trying
what is
to
harmful.
steal the word harm.
Yeah.
And, you know, broaden it to include situational disparities. You know what I mean? Okay, well, there's, you know, situations that are where, you know, one person is preferred over another or something because we've got this culture. It's like, it's not a harm. It's not a harm. And if we allow that, I mean, like, that's meaningless. That's called, we're exploding the value of the word harm entirely. It's a meaningless word at that point. Prejudice is a great word for that, right? You know, prejudice, racism.
Yeah.
Right? These are great. That's fine. We can use those words, you know? But to say that, or, you know, discrimination, sexism.
Yeah, but even those words are used loosely. And, like, so, you know, a female doesn't get a job, you know, she automatically thinks that, not always, but, you know, if she thinks that it's, like, sexism that, you know, kept her from getting a job, it's like, it's not necessarily the case. You just might not have had the best qualifications or, you know, you might, whatever, not been a good fit. Yeah. You know?
Yep.
Doesn't mean it was prejudiced.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, and, you know, that's why this kind of, you know, legislation about this kind of stuff is so tricky. It's like, how do you determine that kind of stuff? You know what I mean? Like, in the case of the gay wedding cake, right? It's like, well, does he make wedding cakes? Yes. Will he do it for gay people? No. Oh. All right. Well, then it's probably because, the gay thing.
Right.
Now,
right.
there's a question. Now, there's an interplay of, of religious freedom and,
right.
And the access to public goods, right? Access to public services. If you're open for business, you're supposed to be providing a public service.
Right.
And,
That's a really tricky situation.
It's a really tricky situation.
To me, it's like, if I was the gay person wanting the cake and someone didn't want to bake it for me, yes, it'd feel a little hurtful. But it's like, well, screw you then. I'll go to another baker that will bake it for me. I'd rather not have you making my cake if you don't want to be making my cake. And in that case, it's like there's many bakers around, unless you live in a very small town like ours. But either way, it's like you can find numerous bakers, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are willing to make your cake.
Yep.
And you'd rather have them make your cake because they're going to be putting better vibes into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the truth is, I think that in modern America, you've got to search harder you've got to search pretty hard for a baker who's not willing to do the gay wedding cake.
Yeah.
And it's it's the inverse of the way it used to be, right? It used to be that we were a very blue meme, kind of moralistic culture, and we were very kind of tied to tradition. That's mostly gone.
Yeah.
Like pretty much everywhere you go.
Yep, and the people that are still kind of that mindset are less likely to speak about it. Like they know that the culture does not feel the same way as them, so I feel like they're a lot less likely to talk about their beliefs, or they may disagree with homosexuality, but they're still like loving of the people, and they don't wish any harm upon them. They still feel like it's wrong, but Yeah,
well, I mean, it was very interesting to watch the talk with Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro, where he talked about, like, well, I probably wouldn't bake you the cake, and I wouldn't come to your anniversary party.
He said that? I thought he said he would come.
No, he said he probably wouldn't go to an anniversary party because it's a celebration of their marriage, and it's something that his religion teaches is sinful, and so to celebrate the sinfulness of the relationship would be kind of against his
it's interesting.
His religious
beliefs.
Right, beliefs. But he said, like, you want to have a barbecue and just hang out.
Yeah.
And do anything else, I'm more than happy to come.
Yeah.
So specific. The idea was to, specifically celebrating it is against my religion.
Right.
So, well, okay.
Yeah. Shall we get back to the...
Yeah, so let's get back to this. In addition, we recognize that these are model policies and that every company has different architecture and business model. We've tried to write these policies in a flexible manner so that companies can adapt their execution to the structure of their services while maintaining some baseline expectations for fairness, transparency, and consumer protection. Okay, so AI and machine learning algorithms are often infected with bias and produce discriminatory results. Why would you want tech companies to use them as part of their enforcement practices? Well,
they're often infected with bias
and produce discriminatory results.
Or non-discriminatory.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, is that, it's kind of back to that earlier paragraph about, I can't remember exactly what it was saying, but like, they want certain people to be able to say racist things.
Right.
If it's against white people, you know what I mean?
Yep. It's, well, I mean, it's the... Well, who is that we read that, there's no such thing as reverse racism. There's just racism.
Right.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, there's just racism, there's just sexism. It's not reverse anything.
Right.
It's like, it doesn't matter what color your skin is. It doesn't matter if you're more, in power or more high up on the hierarchy. You can still be racist.
Yeah. So just to be clear, like, we reject the prejudice plus power thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we recognize that that's something else that needs to be talked about. That's a thing that is, important, but you can't redefine racism.
Yeah.
As prejudice plus power, and then say that power equals your skin color.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, or that power somehow resides in the skin color
right.
of people. It's like Jesse Jackson is a powerful person. Mm-hmm. The fact that he's black does not make him not a powerful person.
He's much more powerful than me.
Cory Booker is a powerful person, right? The fact that he's black does not make him not a powerful person. We've got,
Oprah.
Oprah's a powerful person. She's a very powerful person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
She's like one of the wealthiest women in the world, right?
Yeah, and the fact that she's black does not make her less powerful.
Yeah.
Again, the reduction of people to their immutable characteristics and the categorization of people by their immutable characteristics is really dangerous, and it has no business anywhere near policy, because policy, I mean, it certainly has business in conversations about cultural attitudes, and the interpersonal it's absolutely necessary in terms of our deepening our individual understandings of our culture and our heritage and our our interpersonal reactions, our interpersonal interactions, I should say, with each other, and so individuals, I think, should try to understand where the intersectional, feminists and the intersectional postmodernists are coming from in that regard.
Yeah.
But it has no business anywhere near policy, because policy is like, policy is violence. Government policy is violence, right? And if you want to have discussions around race that take into account these, dynamics, that's great, and we should. And okay, let's talk, right? Let's convince the culture, okay? However, right, we should not be putting those things into law, because then you get, like, we have, so obviously there's different levels of policy, right? There's, organizations have policies that are, rules, right? And depending on the level of, the size of the organization, the United States is a massive organization. Within the United States are all sorts of legal entities called corporations. Corporations have the right to write their own policies, yes, but they shouldn't be developing policies that include things like this, because whether it's the United States government or it's a corporation, when policies are put into place and you get people invested in maintaining those policies and representing those policies and executing and enforcing those policies, people's jobs rely on those things. Suddenly, you're calcifying a system into place that and you're trying to make this conversation static, right?
Yeah.
This conversation is not static. Demographics change, power dynamics change, right? So when you say, when we talk about the right to free speech, like, that's a political principle where people, like, that's not going to change. People should always have the right to free speech, because it's not dependent on their race or their anything else. Like, all people should have the right to free speech, right? And I can say that whether, the country is more black than white, or more Hispanic than white, or more white than Hispanic, or whatever. It doesn't matter. The demographics of the country don't negate the principle of free speech. But the demographics of the nation do negate, at some point, the principles, quote unquote, in intersectionality, right? So if we talk about the fact, like, the idea that the nation is, based in white supremacy, right? That's like if we have a system in place that's based in white supremacy, quote unquote, but the majority of the people running it are black or Hispanic, it's still the same system, right? Let's say we get all the Congress people, the president, everyone's black. They're all black.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that the system that we're engaged in is no longer a white supremacist system? When does it stop being a white supremacist system? Right? The truth is that the system of government that we've got is a technology. It's a human technology, and anyone can use it, right? When laws are in place and policies are in place to intentionally and specifically disadvantage people of other colors, right, of other races, then we're talking about a supremacist system, right? A supremacist system. Not necessarily a white supremacist system. Right? But a supremacist system, depending on who those laws are designed to advantage and disadvantage. If you're creating policies that are designed to advantage and disadvantage people based on their race, you're a racial supremacist. Right? You're putting into policies that you're putting into practice policies that develop that encourage racial supremacy.
Well, yeah. I do feel like the drug laws do disadvantage blacks and Latinos disproportionately.
You're right.
You know, like less white people go to jail over drugs than blacks and Latinos. And
that's true.
I'm not sure if it's the cops or who it is exactly. I'm assuming it's mostly the cops that are, you know.
Well, I mean, it also comes down to the judges too. Like who's putting people in jail, and the fact that we don't have, the overburdened public defenders. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that there aren't racial supremacists. You know, there aren't people that, like, have prejudices and are in positions of power and use that prejudice, whether knowingly or unknowingly, to kind of harm others or to, you know, put people down. You know, but I don't think overall that we are, like, living in a white supremacist nation. You know, we've come a long way, you know?
I don't think so either. I think that if we're talking about, you know, laws that are on, you know, Shapiro says this all the time too. If we're talking about laws that are on the books or policies, you know, at a company that are discriminatory, or you're seeing like actual, you know, some kind of evidence, like hard, like here's some real specific things where people are being treated differently because of the color of their skin, etc. Right?
Yeah.
If we can find that, and like I'm saying, like I've said, like you just said, like in the case of the criminal justice system, there's something rotten.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's something rotten going on.
Yeah.
You know. So,
and that's a whole nother topic, really, and the fact that they're all publicly, you know, they're privately owned. You know?
Prisons, prisons for profit and stuff like this, and then you've got for-profit prisons donating money to PACs, you know, for politicians who want to keep marijuana illegal. It's like, what if there's a conflict of interest there? You know what I mean? It's like, because they want the laws in place to keep feeding them customers, quote unquote, right?
Basically.
So
I just think that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
There's no way that prisons should be privately owned and like profit systems or whatever.
Yeah, I really, even as a libertarian, I believe in the free market a lot. I think that if the state has a monopoly on force and violence, well, you know, that's kind of the idea of the. I mean, that's basically the idea of the state. You know, it's like there's a government, there's some organization in which authority is vested, and this is the organization that's allowed to be the arbiter of violence.
Yeah, because, you know, generally we're supposed to trust them.
Right.
Generally they're supposed to be following a certain set of rules and regs, and obviously they flout those rules all the time, and they use too much force. There's too many rules. You know, there's too many laws, in my opinion. But, I mean, yes, we're supposed to trust them, and, you know, they're supposed to be good, and they're supposed to follow these certain, you know, regulations, you know, but, that's...
Well, no, and I mean
It's a
they
tricky
you know
topic.
they do, but you add, but this is the thing: the more reasons you know give to use force.
Right.
Well, okay, so the state's supposed to be the arbiter of force.
Mm-hmm.
That means if they're the ones that are, what were we talking about?
Well, I brought up the drug war and how that is disproportionately affecting
Right.
blacks and Latinos and just
Right.
minorities.
Yeah.
And then we talked about for-profit prisons.
For-profit prisons. That's exactly right. Okay, so the government's supposed to be the arbiter of force.
Yeah.
Right. Well, a prison
Mm-hmm.
is force.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
forcefully keeping people,
Right.
in. So that should be a government role,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Like if we're separating the use of violence and putting it in the hands of people who are accountable to the public,
Exactly.
right,
Yes.
and not to the dollar,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is kind of the idea,
Right.
then prison should definitely be in the, on the public side of that, not on the private side of that
Exactly.
divide. We shouldn't have private companies that are allowed to inflict violence upon people.
I don't know.
And holding someone in prison is violence.
Exactly. I don't know how or when that came about and that was like became allowed, I just know that it kind of came to my awareness through the show Orange is the New Black,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's, part of the point of the show is to kind of bring up this whole kind of conflict.
System.
It's a big conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's terrible.
You know what I mean? So let's get back to this, but that could be another topic.
So, they believe it's unrealistic to expect human reviewers to adequately monitor most large tech platforms. Well, the volume of data is just too large. Without technological assistance, under-enforcement would be rampant. The human reviewers would always be swamped with too much content to review, and only the most egregious or loudest cases would be addressed. Well, that's maybe great.
Yeah. Might not be a bad thing.
That might be awesome. But they say, of course, that would allow hateful activities to flourish on these services. Again, hateful activities is such a weasel word. There's nothing to that. It doesn't mean anything. It's anything that you want it to mean.
Yeah.
Hateful activities.
Like, are you talking about beheadings? Are you talking about, like, actual violence?
No.
Like, people gathering? What?
The other thing
is
is,
that
like,
mean?
okay, so hateful, what is it? Are you hateful typing? What are you talking about? Activities on these platforms.
Yeah. Are you talking about, like, people using hateful words? Does that constitute hate
right?
activities?
If you want to say that, okay, well, a group of people is, colluding to, deny services to some minority, maybe that would be considered hateful and illegal, but I think that's actually what they're attempting to do. They're attempting to create a situation in which there are large, organizations colluding to stop people from processing payments and from having access to public services.
Right, and just being banned from services or being banned from their platform.
Yeah, those are hateful activities in my estimation. Yeah. So, But when tech companies use software to help monitor for hateful activities, again, that just bothers me, on their platforms, we recognize the risk of algorithmic bias and require algorithmic bias. Because white people are, white males are the, or actually, I don't even think white males are the majority of
tech people
right now. I think a lot of the tech people are Asian and Indian.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of really intelligent programmers, like insanely good programmers are coming out of China and India.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what are they thinking, that people are actually coding into these systems biases?
I've seen they do think that. And I've seen, years ago I saw papers about, feminist critical theory papers about how computer programming is we need feminist computer programming because, you know, computer programming shouldn't be object-oriented and like logic, because it's logocentric and because logic is logocentric, this kind of stuff.
How else would you do it?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Right. They want discursive programming. They don't want yes and no, they want maybes.
How the hell would you do it? Like, I don't understand coding enough, but I don't think that would work.
It wouldn't. It doesn't. And, you know, and that's part of the problem. They think that, you can't code biases. Like, what does that even mean, code biases? You could say, okay, you could intentionally code biases in. You could. You could say, for example, that, you know, racial slurs against black people will get you banned, but racial slurs against white people won't. And that doesn't constitute a problem, right? So you can code biases into the system.
Right.
You can. But nobody's, like, intentionally coding biases into the system.
No
They're
kidding.
saying, like, okay, racial slurs are bad.
Yeah.
We shouldn't allow those.
Yeah.
You know?
Most tech people seem to be more on the side of, like, SJWs a little bit, I think.
Yeah, well, it depends on whether you mean the...
Or at least more on the liberal side of things.
Well,
you know?
This is the thing, is that, like, you can... What do you mean by liberal in this day and age? Right? So you can be on the liberal side of things and not be...
And not be into the SJW world.
SJW thing, you know? So it's like... I think most programmers are probably more in the orange meme, and they're more rationalists and stuff like this, you know? So you get people like James Damore, for example.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, you know...
And he's, like, a sweet, compassionate person. He was just being rational and logical and going based on...
Yeah, he's like, okay, well, we've got a problem where, you know, we don't have enough women in tech.
Why?
And so it seems like in the tech positions that we do have open, you know, that are like more creative and design oriented, stuff like this, that, you know, women tend to go for those jobs more. So maybe maybe we need to have more of those jobs available. It's like,
seems reasonable to me.
Seems reasonable. It's like, okay, well, of course, you know, or, you know, like maybe we need to have more collaborative positions or whatever, you know. And he's talking about like ways to engage more women in tech.
Right.
Right? But his crime was he used as a basis for his arguments that there were, you know, kind of innate or biologically driven, you know, differences at the group level between men and women.
Yeah.
Right? And
can't
so
do that
you
in
can't
this
do
day
that.
and
You can't use evidence.
Yeah.
It's like
can't
no
use science anymore.
No, it's just oppression. It's only oppression. There's no other. There's nothing else there. It's all just the bad, evil patriarchy. Right? It's like, okay, well, like the guy was like trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
You know, that it's posited that this is a problem, that we don't have enough women in tech. Well, what can we do about that? Let's look at women's temperaments. See what they like. Like, wait, women's temperaments? You sexist.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like that's the end of the conversation. You can't have it. You know, and you know, I'm sure that the people from Change the Terms would are happy with the fact that he was fired.
Oh yeah.
Will tech companies be able to use these policies to further invade my privacy, anonymity, or use of encryption? Let's see what they say about that. Well, no, tech companies should not be allowed to use these policies as an excuse to invade their users' privacy, strip them of their anonymity, or undermine the security and privacy of encrypted messaging services. Hateful activities can be reduced while respecting consumer rights. Again, that hateful activities thing is so... There's no other word for it. It's Orwellian. It really is. It's like hateful activities.
I know.
That's straight out of 1984. It's like, you know, you've been convicted of hateful activities.
I was? What are
hateful
you
activities? What is hateful activities? You know, it's just like this. It's like, let's just stick this emotional word. You know, that we like.
Because, I mean, most people, like, if you ask them, like, do you think people should be able to do hateful activities online? Most people would be like, no, of course not.
Of course not. It's a manipulation.
It's very manipulative.
So manipulative, right? Hateful activities isn't, like, there's no boundary around that.
Mm-hmm.
There's no boundary around that word, around that phrase.
They tried to specify earlier on in this article what they meant. But, again, a lot of those words can be defined differently when it comes to online, like harassment, like we talked about the other day. I don't remember if it was on the video or not, but like harassment in person is pretty well defined. Like someone harassing you in the physical reality is pretty well defined, and that is punishable, right. But someone harassing you online, it's like we don't really know what that means as of now, and so.
So if I have I've had Facebook conversations with my aunt, for example. I'm talking and she, I'm just like laying out my side of the argument.
Yeah.
Well, I think this, and this, and this is the way I think it is, and I think what you said about this is wrong because this is, blah blah blah. And I don't think that'll ever work. Blah, blah. And I'm just having this conversation, right?
Right.
And on the other, I don't know this, but on the other side of the screen, she's getting really, really worked up. And, she's getting spun out of control. And eventually she's like, you need to stop treating me like this. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah. That's the problem. You don't get to see people's facial expressions, the tone of their voice. There's so many things you miss out on with text.
Yeah.
That, you don't know where they're coming from.
And, bottom line, I'm not responsible for that person's feelings.
Exactly.
I'm not, I'm trying to have,
no way
if I was in person, I'd probably recognize it before they got really upset.
Exactly.
And I'd be able to back off.
Right.
But it's still not my responsibility to, be some sort of mind reader.
Exactly. But you're right. In person, you could tell if they're taking what you're saying and getting a little agitated about it. You could, maybe step back a little bit or just be like, hey, we're just having a conversation here. I'm not, whatever. You could kind of talk them down a little bit. Mm-hmm. But if they're not with you, they're on the other side of the world or wherever they are, they're not in the same room as you, and they're getting worked up. You have no idea that they're getting worked up. They have no idea what intention you had with how you're saying things.
Well, obviously, I think anyone who's ever had an experience like that online should be able to recognize that it's pretty obvious that there are. So if you've been the one on the receiving end of the surprise, roar, the surprise anger, the sudden anger that you're like, whoa, wait, where did this come from?
Right.
If you've been the one on the receiving end of that, then you know that there's no way to kind of for you to take responsibility for that person's
I think even in person you don't have responsibility over someone else's, the way that they're feeling inside and the way they're reacting to what you're saying. You don't have responsibility over that, but even less so when you're talking to someone on the computer or via text or, So, I don't know what constitutes harassment, is it it can't be based on someone's feeling that they're being harassed.
Right. Well, that's exactly and
via text.
Sure, and that's the. But of course, that's what the claim is, right?
Right.
It's it's there's these really weird there's some really weird subjective definitions that are extremely prevalent. In this SJW intersectional landscape, right? If a person feels like they're being harassed, and they're being harassed. If a person,
felt harmed or feels harmed. Then.
Who am I to deny their experience? I guess, right?
Right.
But, and that's, so let's address that. I'm not denying anyone's experience at all, but I don't think the experience of being upset about something that somebody said is illegal. Is a problem.
Right.
Not really.
Yeah.
That's not my responsibility. right? It's not my responsibility to make sure that you're not upset about the things that I say, right? If you wanna say things and I don't like them, you know.
You can stop talking to the person, especially when it comes to online. It's like, okay.
Yeah, well, that's true too. There's especially online. There's the ability to just kind of.
You can block people.
Block people.
You know, if they're bothering you.
I don't advocate for blocking people because it furthers this kind of like echo chamber stuff.
I'm just saying that like you can get away. Like I know there's online bullying. I know there's people do some crazy stuff online, and I really don't know the extent of it, especially like with younger people,
Yep.
So I'm sure there's bullying and everything, but you can block people or, you can...
Turn off your phone.
Yeah.
Turn off the computer. Yeah. It's, I think we're coming into a world where we have to really get clear about the distinctions between what's real, right? And, there's... To say that the online world isn't real is oversimplified, right? But you can turn off your phone and keep breathing.
Yeah.
You can turn off your computer and keep breathing, right? It's not like it's real in the same way that sitting, feeling something is real. Like you're going to touch my dog.
Yeah.
I can't pet a photo of a dog on the internet.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yeah. There's a level of disconnect.
Yeah. And we really need to kind of tease this out because these distinctions are important. These ideas like these back to that hateful activities thing is like that's the real problem is that it's basically it's a boundaryless term, right, that you can put anything into, and then they filled it with a bunch of other boundaryless terms to kind of like harassment, discrimination,
intimidation, defamation. These things have stricter definitions for things happening in person. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. What's intimidation online?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
I think it needs maybe a looser definition. I mean, I don't know.
It's so weird though, because like we said yesterday, if you're following someone around the grocery store, you're following a stranger around the grocery store, telling them your political opinions. All right, that's pretty close to intimidation. That's really that's like, okay, well, you need to stop because
keep following them around. They're trying to just do their shopping. They're trying to get away, and
that's definitely harassment, and it's pretty close to intimidation, right? Right. So, I mean, that's
that's clear.
It's clear cut.
It's
But
online, it's a lot
like
less.
If you're on Facebook or Twitter and you're like tweeting at somebody, like that's like there's no intimidation in that, really. I mean, if you have to, it has to be the content of the speech, which is something along the lines of like, I am gonna hurt you or whatever, you know. There has to be some kind of like,
or I hope you get raped or
something like that's those are horrible things.
Those are horrible things, and that could potentially constitute, because again, it is inciting violence in a way, or it's sort of threatening. I don't even know.
Is it?
I don't know. I
it's
hope
weird.
This happens to you. I'm not sure if that would be considered allowed.
Right. It's kind of more like along the lines of like, somebody should.
Right.
Oh, that's incitement.
It's like such a small little change, but it's important, these distinctions. Yeah. And like we haven't had the internet and online chatting long enough to really have like lawyers and different people, like people that are, to really like discuss what exactly constitutes breaking the law with your words.
Yeah, well, and I think that change the terms is jumping into that vacuum.
Yeah.
And
or trying to.
They're trying to jump. They're trying to jump into that vacuum and kind of capture power, basically.
Yeah.
They're trying to jump into that vacuum and steal the ability to discuss things outside of their framework,
Yeah. Now,
Well, will government agencies be able to use these policies to control free speech? No. We already talked about that. But yeah, I think maybe we're about ready to start wrapping up here, but
yeah.
I think by and large these initiatives are extremely dangerous. They're going to cause a lot of problems, and we're gonna. I think we are going to need, legal. I'm not one to advocate for legal interventions, generally speaking, but I think it is important to protect fundamental principles, fundamental rights. You know what I mean? And I think that the ability to I think that in the modern world, payment processing constitutes a fundamental right. Kind of like if you were it's basically like if you have cash and you want to interact with someone, you give them money and they give you a service or whatever. Like no one's allowed. You can't interfere with that, right? Like it's a voluntary exchange.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it shows up in Patreon first, right? Because the idea that there's this guy or random whatever people, Sargon wasn't the only one, but let's say there's people on the internet who are putting videos out, and there's other people around the world who would like to give that person money, right? They may not have the ability to walk from wherever they're at to where the person with the video channel they want to support is, and give them money.
Probably not
in person.
And who has cash anymore?
Right, and that's the other thing. Who has cash anymore? Right. It's as cash becomes less and less
used.
Available.
Yeah.
And used and kind of it's.
Like most small, time businesses, like myself included, I've been processing credit cards for years now.
Yeah.
I barely ever take cash at like shows or events.
And so, I think that the technology has changed, and the principle is that people in a free society should be allowed to exchange goods, right, and without impediment. Right, which on the dollar bill, this is legal tender for all debts, public and private.
Right.
It means you have to take it.
Right.
Right. If somebody offers you cash for a debt or for a service, you have to take that. It's what I mean. Like, and especially the government is supposed to absolutely must take it.
Which is crazy though, because when you pay for a lot of different government services, you have to pay by like check or credit card. Well, never mind. Probably not. Maybe that's not always the case. But yes, you're supposed to take cash.
Yes. And and so that's, part of why our society is free. Because there's a method of exchange that's, fundamentally available to people.
Yeah.
Exchange of value. Now, the technology we use to exchange, the technologies we are using to exchange value have changed throughout history.
Yeah.
It used to be you had to actually carry around pieces of metal and hand, here's a piece of metal. I'm gonna
Gold,
give you,
silver,
right?
Whatever.
And that changed over time, and eventually, we were like, well, here's a piece of paper that promises you that there's, this much gold over there, and then we, detached from the gold entirely, and now we've detached from paper.
Yep.
Right?
Predominantly.
We're predominantly detached from paper, and we've got little plastic cards that say, there's a company, that will verify that I've produced this much value, in ones and zeros, and you can have, this many of my ones and zeros. right? It's just information. It's a credit system.
Yeah.
Right? This person has done, stuff that was this valuable to some other people in the society, and so that's how much money they have. So I think that the fundamental prospect that people should, the fundamental thing is that people should have the right to exchange the value that they have, right, that they've accrued, the credit that they've accrued, whatever, to other people. They should be able to give that to other people,
or receive
it without interference.
Exactly.
Right? They're the fact that the bank has to actually process that transaction. I think they have a responsibility not to engage, not to help people engage in violence. Right?
Definitely.
But I think that they need to be like really, really kind of prevented from restricting people who aren't doing violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They need to be able to kind of go like, no, this guy has the schematics for a weapon and he's trying to build it, and he's got a plan to go and use it at this point in time and on this date. It's like,
right.
I don't think that that's who should be stopping violence. Right?
Exactly. It's not their job.
It's not their job. If they know for a fact that somebody's going to cause violence, or that that these people are giving money to a group that's engaged in committing violence, then yes, absolutely they should have the responsibility to stop that. But
it needs to be incredibly clear.
Like, incredibly clear. I don't think that there's any. By and large, I think that we need to make sure that money, the transfer of money, is protected the same way that that speech is in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
People should be allowed to do it.
I mean, that's how we live. It's like the only way we can do things is, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have an ability to give or receive money and you're screwed.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's
and there's only so many banks and payment processors out there. You know what I mean? They're pretty powerful.
They're super powerful.
They need to be out of.
They're ridiculously powerful. And I'm not saying we need to. I'm not saying we need some sort of radical transformation of the financial system.
Yeah.
But we absolutely need to protect ourselves, and our right to engage in commerce, our right to exchange money.
Yeah.
Has to be protected from them. They cannot use their, this kind of arbitrary moral compass to
squash people.
To squash speech. Speech is not violence. We have to stop that nonsense too. That's another important distinction.
Yeah.
The speech is not harmful.
Yeah. Unless you're actively threatening, like literally.
Yep.
Yep. But I think that's about what we have time for today.
All right. So, we're available on Facebook and Twitter at Just Us Chatting. And you can, subscribe to our channel, like the video, get subscriptions. I'm going to start, or, go ahead and hit the little bell to get notifications. And I'm going to start chopping up some of our content so that we've got shorter clips. But video. The reason we do live streams is because video editing takes time, and we both have our own jobs, and we're all we're spending a lot of time working on other things to so that
try to make a living
so that we can have the pleasure of sitting here and talking about things and learning about things and reading about things that are going on in the world. So
send us any articles or links to videos you think we should watch as well.
Yep, definitely want. Always looking for more feedback. So comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And hopefully we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Take care.
Bye.